We thought we would start this conversation with some personal stories. And I was wondering if you could share your own experience with social and emotional learning in your school. And do you feel that it was a big part of your education growing up?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It is indeed very exciting to be part of this conversation, especially now in the 21st century, and more specifically during COVID-19 pandemic. I will share with you my personal story, but also what we have done in education regarding SEL. I have grown up in a culture that is underpinned by a philosophy called Boto. And we also have Nguni languages, they call it Ubuntu. Basically, it's at the center of human life. I am because you are because I am. And that, I think, is at the heart. I'm using heart, not brain, of our living. So when every morning when you wake up and you are greeted by somebody in the family, they will use in a Sotho language, my home language. In English says the night is a lion. When you wake up, greet each other, because the lion might have swallowed you during the night. So it means we must check each other every time you wake up in the morning, because you don't know what would have happened during the night to that person. And when you greet that person, we say in it means all the information is in your face. So when I greet you, I'm having a look at you in your eyes. Are you smiling? Are you sad? What's wrong with you? And we also greet each other. There's no limit to greeting each other. You can't say, hey, I greeted you in the morning. I shouldn't greet you again. We say, Madume Rafael. It means you'll never exhaust greetings. So every time I meet you, I greet you. Because I might have met you in the morning and something happened to you during the day. So I must greet you again to check you are still the same person I met this morning. So that is, I think, very important. If we lose it, we're going to use what you call this SEL, the social and emotional aspect of our being. You know, with the schooling evolving into a modern society, what took over was rational thinking. Anything that makes sense rationally is the one that is dominant in the schooling system and in our lives. The courses are using rational thinking, for example. So emotional thinking has been, excluded from society. So there's no emotional thinking at all. So in our case, the heart is at the center. For example, I'm in Limpopo now, province of South Africa. And in every letterhead, there's a footnote. It says we are the heartland of Southern Africa. It doesn't say we are the brain. So it's not a mistake, because Ubuntu, Boto, has a trinity, relies on Trinity. Trinity is the heart, the body, and the spiritual soul. But in a modern Western philosophy, civilization, mind, body, and soul, the mind, body, and soul. With us, it's not the mind, it's the heart, body, and soul. And so we even have a song, Mele Pelele Moya. And that song emphasizes the importance of feeling. The heart feels, it carries the emotions. It even talks to you. We have a saying that if you have done something wrong and you are not repenting and making sure that you make up, they say, it means will hold you by our hearts. Our hearts will hold you until you make up for the bad thing that you have done. So that is my upbringing, and the philosophy, especially sub-Saharan Africa, subscribes to that philosophy of Ubuntu. There's no English word for it, but some scholars who are learned crafted one of them, Eskia, gave it an English name. He called it African humanism. He tried to explain it to the English world, this philosophy. And it's just that now, mainly it is practiced in communities, in villages, but then this person who grew up in the villages goes into a schooling system which excludes this. And now it means there's a dichotomy. And then in the schooling system, once you lose it, you lose that social glue that holds the community together. And so what happened in the education system, we realized that it is important to integrate this into the curriculum. So in 1994, when we now had first democratic elections, we developed the new curriculum. The first phase of the curriculum, first iteration, was called Curriculum 2005. The idea was to roll it out into the schooling system by 2005, hence the label Curriculum 2005. But then it was reviewed in 1999, around 2000. When it was reviewed, we thought this is the right time now to integrate what we call indigenous knowledge systems into the curriculum. So that has been accepted. And now we have a principle called valuing indigenous knowledge systems, meaning that in the schooling system, we can now embrace this philosophy of Botu, Ubuntu. I am because you are because I am. And if you are traveled, I'm traveled. If I'm traveled, you are traveled. And we must restore that equilibrium together.
How did you first got involved in policy discussions, and how you started your interest in developing and implementing social and emotional learning processes?
I have been fortunate to participate in the curriculum change process way back in the 90s. So when at a political level, there was a change from a system that promoted segregation into a democratic system. We on the education side were also grappling with how to unify different education systems that promoted segregation on the basis of either ethnicity, religion, or race. And when we're doing this, we started to grapple with what principles must underpin the new education system and the curriculum that will give expression to these principles. And I have been fortunate to participate in all of those iterations up to today, from the early 90s up to today. Even before 1994, we were already involved in a very simple project at the time of cleansing. We call them syllabuses of racist overtones. And then after 1994, we then had a constitution that espoused human rights and as well as a democratic and inclusive society, inclusive, so that we could appreciate difference and not loathe it and see it as a negative. And as I indicated, in participating in the new curriculum, we had to grapple, how do we package the new curriculum? And in packaging it, what do we include? And so the issue of life skills, life orientation came to the fore. And we agreed for the first time in the history of South Africa that is where we should locate, not solely, but exclusively, but it should be the subject that drives emotional, social, physical, competences that anyone will need to work in a democratic society, in an inclusive society. Obviously, one subject is not enough to do that because the principles cut across. But that is where you'll find the expression around me and myself, me and my community, me and society as a whole, me and my career. So that is where life skills in the foundation phase, the first 4 years of the schooling system, life skills and early knowledge, and then thereafter life orientation from grade 4 up to grade 12. So that is the subject that I think South Africa has given, where it gave expression to matters around SEL. And this has become it came very handy during COVID, as we were dealing with COVID, and say, all right, now there is this general knowledge from the World Health Organization around COVID. We're following it every day. But who's going to take it up in the schooling system? How do we teach it? Do we just leave it? Every teacher will Google some information and share with learners. And we found that life orientation was the best place. And therefore, the life orientation teachers became the vanguard. The life orientation became the facilitators of knowledge and educating their learners, their parents in the school governing bodies, the teachers, the managers around life orientation. And they developed it was called COVID-19 Orientation Guide, which was developed centrally and it was approved formally. It met certain standards and make sure it is rigorous. And the training, they conducted training of facilitators so that there is a quality and rigor in the way you expose learners to the pandemic. And the same happened with HIV/AIDS. HIV/AIDS education in the schooling system was driven through life orientation. And so whenever the social fabric of society is disturbed, and therefore the teachers of life orientation are now better placed to assist in gluing, bringing the glue back, the social glue back, and using life orientation as a subject.
What are the current needs in this moment in your educational context that SEL, social and emotional learning, could help address?
The demand is great, is higher, especially during the COVID. It exposed urgent need to deal with SEL matters. We found now that the time we've allocated to life orientation in the school calendar is very little. I mean, there is a great demand now for psychosocial support. And COVID-19 has exposed this very clearly, that psychosocial support is needed more than ever before in the history of our education system. And psychosocial support, not just for learners, psychosocial support for teachers, psychosocial support for managers, psychosocial support for parents. So meaning that you also need to draw on the expertise, not only from educators alone, but from psychologists, from social workers, and so on. And currently now, last week on Thursday, the two MECs, these are the political heads of education and social development, last week have addressed a function where we are now taking the ECD function from social development to education. As we do so, we are now bringing under one umbrella the early childhood development. That's where we will need to develop very early these emotional competencies, social competencies under the education umbrella. So by the time they start formal schooling, they're well developed. And in doing so and bringing the function from social development to education, we also were bringing the expertise in the form of social workers who are also coming into the education space. And that is an added resource that we desperately need. And this will be distributed and placed in the district offices. In the district offices, they'll be able to now provide psychosocial support to schools. We are now seeing an increase in the number of bullying incidences, for example, boys and girls. And some of these girls, I mean, it's so terrible when you see. And some of them even taking their lives because they were bullied and their psychological, they were so affected that they saw the only option is to take their lives, meaning we now need more than ever before to promote SEL in our education system and making sure that we have equipped people to deal with that.
What are the changes you've seen so far in students, teachers, stakeholders since you started implementing SEL policies until now? What is the major change in the behaviors you've seen?
When we started introducing the new curriculum and also the new subject called life orientation, it was not there before 94. So in the colleges that trained teachers, they didn't have this as a subject. So what it meant is that after 94, we're introducing a subject, but the teachers were not trained in. But because there was a desperate need for it, we had to bring it into the system as a subject and then use the available resource that is there, the existing teachers, and retrain them in making sure that they can now be life orientation teachers, life skills teachers. I think, and it's only now we're beginning to see that it is now accepted that it is an important subject. But also in terms of weighting, it is the only subject that has 75% school-based assessment weight. Others are having 25%. So this is the only subject that carries 75% school-based assessment weight from primary up to secondary school, grade 12, and also the time. And this is, I think, an area that even when universities are looking for accepting learners into universities, they do not see it as an important subject. It's not carrying a weight. You know, what carries weight are the others, cognitive subjects that deal with but this one is not carrying that weight. And if we don't prioritize it and give it weight, so that anyone who's coming out of either the schooling system or the university system, having developed social and emotional competences, it will continue to force us to react whenever there is a crisis or a pandemic. But we need to be proactive. We need to move ahead. And I think that's why you're prioritizing SEL. I'm sure that's why you're saying, remove it from the wardrobe, from the cupboards, under the table. Let's put it, let's foreground it. Let's be proactive. We don't want to be reacting all the time to crisis. We need to be proactive. And by being proactive, we are now preventing, because prevention is better than cure. We are now preventing future crises. And I think that is where I think we should be focusing our energies on.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And I completely agree with this idea of SEL for developing resilience in societies.